Welcome to the 12-Step Recovery Evolution podcast. Visit recoveryevolution.co.uk for more episodes, helpful resources and links to our social media. Also visit the site for information on how you can attend a future Zoom session or workshop live. Thank you.
Morning everybody, lovely day here in sunny Lowestoft, well Beccles as my wife likes to say, that we're out in the country, it's a beautiful day. And so today I was thinking, I'm kind of making this up as I go along, this isn't like a course that I've sort of ever done before or I normally do, but because of the circumstances that we're in, we started doing these daily talks, and they're mostly for the people that come through our treatment centre or have had to go home early. So again, it's very foundational stuff, but you know, as we've been doing it, there's some great little gems that I discovered. It's kind of nice even myself, because of like the program being a developing, growing in understanding process. It's nice to actually do this for myself, because then I'm quite surprised how much I've learned when I start telling other people. And of course, that's one of the great things about working with others. You really develop yourself spiritually when you're actually carrying this message to other people. So I realise some of this is sort of fantastic, and again, it just makes me love this program even more, the simplicity of it. So this is all pretty basic stuff that we're talking about, and so don't want anyone to think it's the be all and the end all. And again, it's kind of only basic stuff coming from my point of view. So you may have a different idea of what it's saying and a different way of putting it, and that's fine. This is just the way that I see it. And so I think today, again, overall we were talking about on awakenings, and we're still trying to give sort of more foundation. And again, I'm just always keen on drilling down onto what we think the problem is and how to sort of isolate it and make it clear, because I think we can make this a lot more simple, so then people aren't in doubt. Because otherwise you go off into meetings and listen to people talking about their problems for the rest of your life, and you're never going to hear about the program, or never know when people say, what's the program? You're probably not going to be able to give an answer if you don't have one. But that also means that you're not getting the treatment for addiction, which can be lethal for some people. And so, you know, the goal is to try and make sure that you understand about the program, and that's what we're doing. So we thought we were doing on awakenings, and we're breaking it down a little bit. And at the moment, I'm going to go back to sort of how it works, and I'm looking at not going to spend long there, but the how it works bit is quite important. But there was a bit that we read yesterday that it said some of us try to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. So that's kind of what the subject's going to be about today, is this letting go absolutely. Because and again, what are old ideas? You know, because that's something that you can just skip over, and you know, you can hear it, and just because we hear stuff doesn't mean we understand it. You know, like I've said already in one of our groups that I like to do, when I say the word apple, I ask people what colour apple comes in your head. Some people say green apple, some people say red apple, and I say, well, I was talking about computers. So just because somebody says something and you hear something, it doesn't mean you understand, which is why I think it's always important to make sure that you do your own study. And again, I take up a lot of my day doing that. I mean, I just haven't got enough hours in the day being here. I think I could probably do another 20 years of this isolation to get done what I want to do and learn all the things that I want to learn. And then there's still a pile of jobs building up. You know, I still haven't fixed the gate. There's a bit of the gate falling off and it doesn't shut properly. And you know, I bought me saw home to fix it, but I haven't got around to that yet. But that's still like number 20 on the list of things to do. There's still plenty to do. The grass needs cutting. Just discovered all these plant pots, and I thought, well, I've got no flowers to put in them. But then I've looked in some of them, and they're actually growing about 20 flowers. So today I'm going to get me or the missus out there and start spreading them out to the other pots to see if we can get and look around the garden and see what flowers are sort of hidden away that we can put in pots. So there's always plenty to do, but I've got to let go of some of them old ideas. See, one of the old ideas I can hear is, oh, I don't know what to do, or I don't know, I'm bored. And it's boredom, honestly, is a sign of needing to change. Just if you're bored, it's you need to change the way that you're thinking, because there's always plenty to do. But when your mind's kind of closed, I mean, I can always find hundreds of things to do. Always. One of the problems I have in life is that I can never get done everything I want to do. I have to try and wind it down and prioritize, because there's so much to do. And again, that's one of the wonderful things that I've discovered in treatment and coming into recovery, that this whole world has opened up to me. And you know, I used to have a guy who used to sponsor his Hell's Angel, he was, and he used to say that he'd say one day he was sitting at home and saying, oh, he kept going on about how bored he is and he's got nothing to do and he don't know what to do. And then he says one day these yellow pages hit him in the head. And his wife threw these yellow pages at him and hit him in the head. And she said, you can do anything in that yellow pages. She said there's so many different kinds of dancing and jobs and languages and music and hobbies and traveling. She said that book is full of things to do. Pick some of them and get on with them. So there you go. There's a good tip. If you don't know what to do, have a look on the online yellow pages. There's hundreds of ideas of things you can do. Anyway, so this talk's going to be about trying to look at what our old ideas are and why they're important, because the truth is your belief system is the key to change. So your belief system, what you believe, is going to be the key to the change in your life. And so it's understanding what is my belief system? What is it that I believe? Now, most of us that don't have a structured belief, we tend to just pick stuff up. So we never really thought about it. We never really considered it. It just kind of got put in our head. Somebody told us, and it just become our belief system. Now, a lot of them old ideas that we got in our head, especially the ones that we're trying to identify, that probably you spend a lot of time thinking about, and that these beliefs spend a lot of time dictating and determine the course that you take in this world. Because, you know, decisions are pretty important things to make, because if you make bad decisions, you usually end up in bad experiences. If you make good decisions, you usually end up in good decisions. So really, your decision-making process is probably the most important thing you have. And again, that all happens between your ears, where all your life happens. All of your life happens between your ears. So we're just trying to get you to take responsibility for this little bit of real estate between your ears. This little bit of real estate between your ears is where pretty much, if we can get control of that and get that working right, if we can get your mental health right, you're going to notice that your life's going to improve. So these old ideas are contained in there. This belief system that you have is contained in there. And so we need to get in there and start changing it, because we're not going to change your life unless we can change your thinking. So it's saying here, if you hang on to them old ideas, if you hang on to them old belief systems, if you hang on to them old thoughts, then where change is concerned, there isn't going to be any. The result is going to be nil. I'll say that again. If you're trying to hold on to your old thoughts and keep making the same old decisions, there's going to be no change in your life. None at all, nada. You may get older, you may get more wrinkly, things may get worse, but where the addiction process is concerned, nothing's going to change. And again, I can see that when I go to meetings where I don't think they've got a program, where they just go to meetings, they talk about their problems, they put the plug in the jug, blah de da de da de da. They talk about the program, but they don't actually do one. And when I go back there 15, 20 years later, there's no change. They'll look older, sicker, but the story's the same. The only experience that they have is still the old experience, because they're not developing a new experience. See, one thing I've learned about time and time in the program and time in life is someday this is going to be the past. Someday this is going to be, we're all going to look back at today and it's going to be the past. And then people say, well, you can't change the past. It's like, well, I don't want to have to change it. But if I don't want to have to change the past, I'm going to have to live well today. And so I've learned that when I apply this program today, I look back and I'm happy with the past. So it's important that we drill down on this thought process, because that's kind of what we're dealing with. We're trying to drill down on what is it that's causing us to fail? What is it in our mind that's causing us to make bad decisions? Now, again, a lot of them decisions you're making, they're not actually you. Every alcoholic and every addict on planet Earth makes the same decisions around addiction. Them old ideas, they're not all yours. Every alcoholic and addict on earth makes them same fateful decisions. Now, again, there's differences in things that we do, but where addiction's concerned, every person with this mental condition, with this spiritual disease or separation or malady, all the people whose dilemma is powerless, they all make the same decisions and they all end up in the same place pretty much. And so we've got to figure out what are them thoughts that keep leading me back to this addiction, this suffering, this disease, this irritability and this discontent. So I like this kind of idea that when we come into this program and we start doing inventory, that it's like going into an optician's now, because it's all about our perception of reality. You know, when I say the word apple, some people's perception of that reality is red. But that's a recoil, that's a set thought, that's something that they're just responding. And when somebody says apple, their response is red. Or some other people think green. Because that's a conditioned response in their mind. Now, some people that are thinkers may say, what do you mean apple? What are we talking about? Granny Smith, red apple, green apple? We're talking about computers? We're talking about the big apple? What apple are we talking about? They delve a little bit deeper into it. They don't just go on their old idea. And that's kind of a good example of good infantry, that we're checking our responses and just seeing, are they going to match the reality that I'm actually talking about? And so we look at, I like this idea of like that what makes us alcoholics and addicts is we have a bit of a twisted perception of the reality that we're facing. And it's twisted by these old ideas, these old set responses. Now, some of them come from our life, but because we've all lived different lives as alcoholics and addicts, but we all end up in the same place, we have to conclude that not all of them thoughts come from our past. Not all of them thoughts come from our childhood. But a lot of them thoughts are coming from our mental condition. Because we all share them same thoughts. And we have to share the same thoughts because we're all making the same decisions, and that's how we all end up in the same place. And we all know in recovery, when you come in recovery and stop making them decisions, you don't end up in them places anymore. So it's that driver of that, what them thoughts are. So as you go into an optician's and he sticks you in his chair and you look at the numbers on the screen and you see that it's all blurred and something's twisted your perception of reality. And when you're an alcoholic and addict, you've got resentment, you've got fear, you've got obsession about drugs, you've got self-will, self-pity, self-this, self-that, and all of that is twisting that perception. And then as you come into recovery and start working the program, you start putting other, like when you're in the opticians, he starts just putting different slides in. And what do you see now? What does it look now? What number now? A, B, A. What number now? What do you see now? And all the time he's putting different lenses in. Forgiveness, peace, a bit of hope, a bit of understanding, a bit of education, a bit of knowledge. And as you start putting all these new principles into your perception, the picture starts to become clearer. So it's kind of like that when you're sponsoring people and they come and they say, oh, this is happening, that's happening, and you kind of tell them some of the principles and they start making adjustments in their thinking, and then it's like, what do you see now? What do you see now? What do you see now? And they're like, oh, it seems all right now. It actually wasn't as bad as I thought, and maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And it's like, cool. You've been restored to sanity, that you can now see a lot more clearly what's actually happening. And then hopefully you can relate to that situation, that person, place or thing in a more principled manner. So I also like this other idea. Now, again, these are all just ideas that have helped me to understand. So I'm not saying they're all scientific fact or, super spiritual or anything. You can decide. They're just ideas to just, again, narrow down what we're dealing. Because, again, I know today that if we can get all you guys to take responsibility for your thinking and realise that you can change your thinking, you can all have a better day. I always like that Abraham Lincoln, that you're as happy as you make your mind up to be. And so whatever you got going on in your head today, whether you're worrying about something and being full of anxiety, because whatever you think you're going to feel, and whatever you feel you're going to do, so if you can improve your thinking today, you can improve your whole life. And if you're in a house with a family and you're going around like a bear with a sore head, you're making their life miserable as well. And so if we can improve your thinking, you can improve your whole family's experience today. And so I like this other idea that's always made a lot of sense to me, is that we tend to see the world through our intellect, which is fraught with these old ideas. And again, I'm not saying this is actually happening. This is just the way that I kind of like to look at it. It's imagine this, is that your intellect, and your intellect is, I wrote it down, it said it's the facility of reasoning and understanding. So again, it's kind of like, it's based on your ability to reason and understand. And that's going to be based on your belief system, your information, and your past experiences. That, people that know better tend to do better. But sometimes people are making very good decisions, but based on very bad information. They're making very good decisions, but it's based on very bad information. But when you give them different information, they make better decisions. Most people are making good decisions based on bad information. Most people that know better do better. And so the intellect, it takes a photograph of reality. And then what it does, it cuts out the bits that it doesn't understand. And this all happens subconsciously until you become conscious of it. It cuts out bits that you don't understand. And then it sticks other bits in that it likes. And you kind of know that an easy example of this is, you know, that if you kind of like buy a new car, or you get a new pair of trainers or a new jacket, but mostly with cars you notice it, that if you go and buy yourself a white transit van, and then all of a sudden you see all these white transit vans everywhere, and you're like, mate, they've always been there. It's only when I become conscious of them that I now see them everywhere. And even in the room, you're looking at this screen, but my mind, I have to become conscious before I notice the chair over there, and the outdoors and the TV and all of the other things in the room. So subconsciously, your intellect's kind of doing that. Your mind is kind of doing that. It's taking this photograph of reality, and then it starts to decipher it, and it can't decipher what it doesn't know. Nobody knows what they don't know, so it cuts them bits out, and then it sticks other bits in. And some people, you can see them doing this quite clearly, that they always seem to give you their version of reality that suits them. You know, they seem to build a version of reality that sort of suits them, and maybe that's, you know, what they're seeing. But anyway, regardless of that, then so we take this photograph of reality, we cut out what we can't understand and what we don't like, and then we start sticking other stuff in that we do like, and then we start pushing the buttons, and it doesn't work. Now this happens with people as well. It's like we meet people, and then we start having all these fantasies about them, and we think we know them, and you know, we've got this delusion of who we think they are, and then that bubble starts bursting, usually after about 3 months. And then this other person starts emerging out of this image that we had, and we find out, who's that sitting across the other side of this kitchen table? I don't know who they are. And so the only way I can find out of that, once you've actually lived that way for most of your life, that you're just responding to this photograph, as you're responding to this twisted perception of the world, because of this twisted perception in the brain of reality that's sort of being fueled by all kinds of hurt and ignorance and emotions, and, you know, very limited view of the world through the addiction, and life isn't working very well, and we think that you know, we're being cheated and it's unfair and we're just unlucky, and you know, that's just the way life is. And then when you actually start coming into programs or spiritual workshops and things like that, we say, look, you've got to start living by these principles, which means you've got to let go of your old ideas. Because again, if you keep following them old ideas, any hope of change, the result is going to be nil. If you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, that's insanity, that's addiction. And so eventually we say, look, you've got to have some faith in these principles. And in the Bible it says this: we walk by faith and not by sight. What that means is, we don't walk by this intellect. We don't walk by what we're actually seeing in our perceived reality. It says no matter what's happening in the world, and no matter how much you want to apply the old ways, it says have some faith in these principles. Apply this principle. And as you start applying the principle, instead of acting on the old ideas, what starts to happen is your life starts to get better. And the reason that your life starts to get better is because now you're starting to respond to reality. You're starting to get in line with what's actually happening in reality. And then the better you get at it, the more you push the buttons in the world, the better the responses that you get. And so them old ideas, that old self, you know, like we're getting the self, the the personality, the personality that we've built starts going behind the principles. So no matter what happens, or no matter how myself wants to respond, I try and resist that, and I try and respond with the principles. And again, personally, in my own life, I found that when I stopped trying, like when I first come around AA, and they said, the God of your understanding. Well, I got a God of my understanding, and he was very much like me, and he didn't mind what I did, and everything I did was okay because God told me that I could do it, because I'd managed to change the principles to suit myself. I managed to, like they say, God made man in his image, and we return the favour. And so I took them principles and I changed them to suit myself. And after 5 years of that, it wasn't working so well. And I felt just as desperate, just as unhappy. Literally, in my stomach, this feeling of desperation just ripped open. And I felt as desperate of 5 years in recovery as I did the day that I come in. The only difference was there was no drink or drugs in my life at the time. And I thought, man, I can't live like this. I was only 30 at the time. I thought I could be alive for another 60, 70 years. I can't live like this. It's too hard. It's like really difficult periods followed by a little bit of relief. And that's the time in my life when I started to take the principles serious. It's when I really accepted God. Personally, I accepted a faith. So really, the principles become very clear to me of the things that I needed to change and the things that I couldn't do. So, I don't argue about them. I don't argue about them principles or rules or anything like that anymore. I haven't from that day. I do try and develop them. And then what started happening is, instead of me changing the principles to suit myself, I started to let the principles change me. So instead of me trying to change the principles, which I do see a lot of people doing in the fellowship, they don't want to accept the principles, or they want to lessen them, or they want to change them. And the result of that is nil. So when I let the principles start changing me, my twisted perception of reality started to untwist. And then I got in a lot better relationship with myself, with God, and with the world. And now that when I tend to do stuff, it tends to work out a lot better for me. Now, not everything works out, because that's not the way life rolls. But even when it's not working out, I'm just behaving like a regular human being with a good spiritual understanding, and I'm okay with that. And so, let me see what we got. So I wanted to get in a little bit more about the principles, but I think tomorrow we're going to have a good look at the principles, and on Friday I'm going to do a group where I'm just going to ask you guys to bring some questions that you may have. Now, they can be about some of the subjects of this week, or they can be about anything that you've got concerns about recovery. So Friday is just going to be like a Q&A meeting, and tomorrow we're going to look more on the about acceptance. But I'm not going to talk too much more now, because I want to give you guys some time to respond about the old ideas, about what they are and how they're playing out in your life today, and how we can change them. So just want to keep that simple today, and that's going to give you guys like half an hour so we can have a bit of a discussion around that. Oh, one other thing is, I'll tell you at the end before we shut off. So if we want to open that up, folks, and anybody that wants to share anything or ask any questions, just to make sure everyone's clear on what we're talking about here.
So first up, I have Bryony.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just find it really amazing still, wonderful that I hear a message that is exactly what I need to hear. And day before yesterday, I was planning on a book study with my sponsor, and it was the chapter wives, and I was a little bit disparaging about that, and that was my arrogance coming in. And I realised the next day that the only time I'd ever looked at that chapter was in a meeting, and I'd listened to everyone else in the meeting, and I'd agreed with some of the people in the meeting, probably because I wanted to be liked and all of that stuff. And I'd gone away with a preconceived idea that I didn't need that chapter, and how wrong could I have been? And I'm lucky that I have got a really good, strong sponsor that steers me well on this, and began to read that chapter yesterday. It was nothing like what I remembered it. And it was extremely relevant for where I am at the moment, where I'm looking at amends with my children and my family, my parents and all those things. And it put me in touch with a little bit of, it put me in touch with a lot of the damage that I'd done, because I could see it in that chapter when they were talking about the alcoholic, but it also gave me a glimpse of how my family must have felt at times, and why they still have the hurt that I have to be really delicate and careful around when I make my amends. And so the first thing that Lester said was you need to do your own study, and that's exactly what we did. And I'm so glad that that's what I did, because if I'd gone away with the preconceived ideas that I'd taken from somebody else's ideas about it that came up in a discussion in a meeting, I would have missed out on something really valuable. I just wanted to say thank you, and I love it when those things just come into place at the same time, and it's reaffirmed that I'm doing the right thing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bryony.
If you'd like to put your hand up and you have a computer with a keyboard, if you hold and press the Alt key and then Y, tap Y, that'll raise your hand so I can see that you'd like me to unmute you. Excellent. So I've got Jodie.
Hello. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was going to ask this because I find it a little bit cringe, but something I've been struggling with, and especially in this isolation, which is letting go absolutely, is for me it's sort of people. I've gone through a lot of years, and I find it extremely hard to let people go, but it tends to always be when they've been someone that's sort of been quite toxic to me. And then anyway, I've been doing a bit of research as I've been doing these days on it, and it basically showed that, or this study says that anguish and pain after romantic rejection is a kind of addiction. Once we get stuck on those thoughts, being rejected by the other person can intensify them, leaving us to deal with an obsession, which is a kind of addiction. How do you sort of work on that? Like, you know, I'm doing a lot of praying around sort of letting go of the obsessive thinking around that, and it does help, but there's just constantly like these nagging thoughts of people from the past, you know, and it's always people that have sort of rejected me, or you know, I've not been quite enough sort of thing, and it's those people. I just find it really hard to let it go, and I find myself, I'm really unproductive when I keep having those obsessive thoughts about people, and I hope that I don't sound like a stalker. I'm not that bad, but it's just in my own head, they're just constantly there. So that's something I really struggle with, and I'm obviously not working a very good program around getting rid of those thoughts, because it doesn't seem to be working. Or am I just being impatient, and if I keep going it will happen?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is don't beat yourself up, because again, that feeling not good enough, that's quite a trap, and that's an old idea that we all tend to have. So it's very difficult to not beat yourself up, because it's very deep stuff what you're talking about. And the truth is, as far as I can tell, this country hasn't been very good at dealing with that. You know, that stuff sort of tends to be what we work on in ongoing recovery once we've sort out the drug and alcohol problem, which is always the immediate addiction to deal with, because that makes people so chaotic. You know, that's what I'm saying, Jodie, that this is just the beginning. You know, the beginning of this is just saying, look, let's first of all stabilise people from their drug and alcohol habit. Let's get them abstinent so that their brain can start redeveloping. And then you start getting into what you're talking about, which is usually quite deep childhood traumas. And the traumas that we're often trying to avoid. And so it's kind of a strange thing, isn't it? You'd think that if you didn't feel loved, say by your father growing up, I'm not saying that's your problem, but just giving an idea, that if you didn't feel loved by your father, let's say, and there was a big vacuum in you where you thought, I've not been loved and I never felt loved, then you think what you would do is go and find somebody that would love you. You think you would be attracted to somebody that loved you. But the strange twist is we're actually attracted to other people that can't love us.
Yeah.
And so we become more attracted and more attached to the things that are most familiar to us.
Okay.
You see, so now that's very difficult to change, and that takes a bit of time to change that. You know, I don't know whether this is a true story, or I can't even remember where I got this information, whether it was from somebody or from a book or an article. I can't read the information, but and it's quite graphic and it's quite difficult. But they say that it was sort of based on a social worker, and that if a child has been abused and abandoned and mistreated by the mother, that when the care worker goes in to remove the baby from the mother, even though the care worker has never done any harm to the baby whatsoever or the child, the baby will still want to cling to the mother. So even kind of like a human being, the abuse is a lot more, we still want to cling to it because of it's more familiar than the unknown.
Okay.
So you know what you're looking at there is you being asked to go into the unknown. But see, them uncomfortable feelings that you got, you kind of want to get away from them, don't you?
Well, yeah, because I feel like when they're still coming up all the time, that I'm not letting go absolutely. So then I feel like I'm not working a good enough program or something, because I can't seem to let go of those thoughts.
All right. So, and how does that make you feel?
Shit.
Right. Now, what can you do to change that? Now, what you just told me there was your belief system, and they're your old ideas. Because how familiar is that thought process with you?
Very.
Right. So there's your records, innit?
Yeah.
Right. So now, what can you change now to improve that situation? What could you do immediately to improve that situation? If I could reach in your head now and take out some thoughts, which ones could we take out now that would improve your situation right now?
I don't know, really. I don't know. I guess I do need to stop being quite so hard on myself around the whole thing, but I don't know.
Maybe or definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Right. So if you definitely stop being so hard on yourself right now, that would improve your situation.
Yeah.
So now what's stopping you from doing that?
Nothing, just myself.
Which is the root of your problem. So what principle now can you start practicing today to let run through your mind rather than that old idea?
Probably multiple. Have some courage to not be so hard on myself. Have some more integrity, better boundaries.
You can forgive yourself.
I'm not amazing at that one yet. I'm working on it.
Oh, well, that's why it says practice the program. So let's leave you with that today. That today is going to be on the calendar, forgiveness, Jodie, and not being hard on herself today.
Okay.
And tomorrow we're going to see how you get on with that. But that's just the beginning. But that gives you something today, just to show that if you could just change that thought process, how quickly you can change your life. But again, it's going to keep coming up because there's something underneath that needs to be plucked out.
Yeah.
But just practice that today, and then we'll see how you get on with that, and then we can have another look tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Next up, we have Lee.
Hey guys, sorry. Yeah, sorry about my glasses. I've actually got allergies, so I think summer is coming. So like I've got hay fever, so I find it hard to breathe and stuff like that. Anyway, but yeah, I relate to Jodie with what she was saying. The girl that I was with whilst I was in rehab, ECR, it was such a toxic relationship, but it was familiar to me to be in that relationship. I mean, she physically hit me and stuff like that. But I mean, even now, we're not talking, but it's just because it's familiar, and I'm used to being abused. I'm used to going through life having people sort of poke me, hit me, swear at me, treat me like crap, and that I know it sounds mad, but that sort of makes me feel sort of comfortable, you know. And the past, it's only been for about probably a week, like 7 days, that I've actually, instead of concentrating on her, I've been concentrating on my kids. And even though I can't see them at the moment, they're with my mum. My mother is looking after them, but I've been concentrating on them, ringing them at least 3 times a day. I went and done a shop yesterday at Tesco's for my mum and sent it round in a cab, and I got so much praise for that, and it made me so happy. And I tell you, concentrating on my kids has made me feel so much more happy than this girl has ever made me feel. It's yeah, it's really done me a good turn. Concentrating on my kids and just concentrating on my kids and what really, really my true love is, you know, rather than chasing ladies, which has always been a bloody trouble for me. It has, but you know, I'm a sexy guy. What can I say? Anyway, I'll leave it there. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. There's nobody else in the queue. Anybody else have anything to share?
I was just thinking about what Lester and Jodie were saying, and I think that's definitely right. Because when you look at my my daughter's stepbrother, he was born addicted. His mum's been on crack and heroin all of his life, and he's now 16 going on 17, and I think that he absolutely adores his mum. He will protect her to high heaven. He would never, honestly, it's just the most saddest thing on planet Earth. And I've tried to speak to them and say to them, look, to help your mum, you've got to talk to the social services. But every time it's kind of come to the crunch, he's closed down because he wants to protect his mum. He loves his mum with all of his heart, and it's just so sad. And I think that there was a meme, I'm just trying to think of it. It said something like this. It said, when parents neglect or don't when parents neglect or abuse their children, and it's never coming from a bad place, it's just coming from a very sick and separated, godless place. When parents do that to their children, the children don't return that feeling to their parents. They feel it about themselves. So the children continue to love their parents, but they just start to feel that what their parents have reflected to them about themselves. And that's a real profound and very, very sad statement when you think about what we're responsible for when we're bringing up children. We're responsible to reflect love, patience, development, kindness. We're responsible for reflecting that to our children. But when we're sick and in our active addiction, whether it be using, drinking, or in early recovery, children start to feel that about themselves. So that's what that's what that brought up for me about children. It's very sad.
Thank you, Sonia. You're muted, Fox.
Sorry, I've got an experience to share. Before I went through the steps, I went through quite an intensive period over a couple of months of working through the big book with my sponsor in a bit of a group environment. And we were looking for certain things within the big book. And the two things that leapt out at me was one of the lists of things we went through and I wrote down was the list of things I must do. The things I must do from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And essentially it was born out of the writings within the first, the first over 64 pages where I had to find those and write them down. So I ended up having quite a big list of things the people of, the sort of early people of Alcoholics Anonymous had to do. And from that, I was able to see that list. And I wanted to build them into my life. And then the last part of that whole study was creating a list of what were referred to as designs for living. Now, on that list was I had to let go of old ideas. When I went through the designs for living, I can't remember how many there are, but I think there are about 40 or 50 designs for living. And I was asked to just pick the top 10 to 15 and write them down in the order. And one of those was a lot of what surprised me was a lot of the designs for living I had at the top were about improving my spiritual condition, my fitness, fitting myself to be of maximum service to God as I understood him then. But also in that list was letting go of my old ideas. And that design for living, I had it pinned up, I carried it around with me, and I just tried to build that stuff. So I was constantly analysing, kind of reviewing my behaviour throughout the day and my thinking throughout the day based on that list. So letting go of old ideas is something I would look at a couple of times a day for about 18 months. When I get angry or when I give the same response to a similar situation, I'd have to look at, that's an old idea, I've got to change that. And then with the help of God of my understanding, good sponsorship, a lot of that fell away. And I mean fell away once I could put my finger on it. When I could put my finger on what that old idea was, I found great improvement in my life, to the point that I can't remember some of those lifelong old ideas. They've gone. I just wanted to share that experience, that it is not something that works overnight. It can do in certain circumstances with certain old ideas, particularly the ones that are most painful, give us the most bruises. When we can find a new idea to replace that one, we're quick to give it up. But some of the other ones, that took some work on. And then coming into my new employment, I've found I've got some other old ideas that I've never had to face. I've got things like colleagues now. So whereas before I didn't have to worry about the old ideas that affected colleagues because I didn't have any. So that's cool because I'm working through those, with good sponsorship, good help, and good spiritual guidance. I just thought I'd share that. And I've got two more people that So Dan, morning mate.
Morning, how are you? Sorry I got to the group a bit late. I was doing some stuff with Shirley. So yeah, it's really interesting listening to what Lester was saying, and really like what Jodie was saying. I thought that was really honest, and I really sort of admired your courage there, mate, getting vulnerable. And you know, I think I really like the idea of like the principles, and I think if you're broken enough, then not all the time, but you're a bit willing to listen, ain't you? And you know, I just didn't know what I was doing early on, didn't have a clue, and I'm really grateful that even in the fellowships, people said, all right, look, mate, you know, why don't you come and get involved? And, you know, do you fancy doing the washing up or making the tea? And, you know, and it kind of got me back involved. So, you know, there was a bit of action involved in that. And then I can remember being stuck in meetings and, you know, just doing that all day and talking big book all day and sitting in coffee shops. And then people saying, look, you know, why don't you get like a bit of voluntary work or something? And then, you know, as time went on, you know, get a little job or something, you know, you're probably ready to start a bit of work now. You've got 2 arms and legs at work, and your brain obviously works because you keep talking about your thinking. And I sort of got guided into that. And then, you know, self-employment and then sort of letting go of the dull. You know, it was a big thing for me because I'd always had that comfort blanket, you know, oh, yeah, what if? And, you know, sort of getting free of that. And I think I've always been a very fearful person, question myself a lot, because I come from quite critical parents. You know, I didn't really get a lot of pat on the back. Oh, that was really good. You done really well there. It was always sort of getting, you know, told off and criticised for what I didn't do. And then, you know, I think about 3 years in, it might have been around there, I kind of had another look at amends and the stuff that Lester was talking about, realising, having some long chats with my dad and realising that he was really criticised as a kid. He was never shown a lot of love and he see a lot of abuse. And then my mum breaking down and telling me that one of her uncles had molested her and things, and just realising that they were really hurt, damaged people sort of thing. And I think going forward for me, it's kind of like I don't want them generational curses to affect my daughter, right? And I can see that they do at times. So just trying to keep shining love into her and not become the critical parent. Love you guys. Cheers, Les.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, is it me?
Yes, Amber.
Hello. Sorry, I was just I was
Hi, Amber.
put myself up for these and then I go blank. But I'm going to try and tie in what I got from what Jodie and Sonia and Lester have been talking about, and that's for me my experience at ECR and working through the steps that I've worked through and living with my peers and stuff. And I've taken a few things which keep repeating in my mind on how to deal with situations. So I find that when I start to feel like negativity around a person or a place or a thing, I think, right, stop. And I think, right, hang on, what's going on here? And I realised that there's something toxic about it. Something toxic could be either about that person, place or thing. And it's something that I'm harbouring in myself that's reflecting back to me. And something that I remember really standing out in my mind, I can't remember who said it, probably more than once, is you can't transmit what you haven't got. So, like, I'm trying to, you know, maybe on the one hand, I want to reach out to someone or something. But then if I'm struggling, I've now learned to take a step back and realise that I haven't got what I need to deal with that, and it draws me back closer to the fellowship and the support that I get from that and from the principles that I learn in the steps, and to make sure it's just a way of checking myself really, and to move away from those things that I've got no power of, that I can't change at that time. And it's just a reminder when I start to feel like that to move away from those things and move back to where the love and the support is, and also give myself a bit of patience and know that as I get stronger I will be able to deal with those things. But I think that anyone who's just come through to this program, even if you're a year or so down the line, I would imagine that, you know, it takes a long time to change old habits and build strength and to know who you are on a deeper level, and to be able to give more on a deeper level. And Yeah, just, I don't know, I suppose I'm just reflecting back to myself what I need to remind myself from that. And I love the way that Dan handles the situation with his daughter, you know, just keeps giving her love. And I think that's so important. It's just like, I'm learning, I'm not there yet. I'm learning not to have a fight with everyone and everything anymore, because the fight's just within me. And if I do, just all I can transmit is love and tolerance that I've learned for myself into those situations. So yeah, that's what I got from that. So thank you everyone for sharing.
Thank you, Amber. Go on, Carol.
Hi. Yeah, it was something that was a revelation for me a couple of months back doing Leicester's group, when I really identified with what Jodie was saying about the unavailable men, and always having that same pattern myself, and then suddenly in that group realizing that I was actually unavailable too, and I couldn't quite comprehend that. And I think when Leicester said to me, well, if those people ever turned around to you and gave you everything you wanted, you'd run a mile. And I thought, no, I wouldn't. And then I thought, no, well, that never actually happened. They never did turn around and and gave me everything I wanted. So I don't know what the outcome would have been. And the more I've actually sat and thought about that through my life, I realise now that, yeah, I am. And I choose those people because they can't give me what I need, because I also am unavailable. So that's a new revelation for me that's, you know, operating in my life now and making me see things in a different way. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Well, again, that is true. That's realising that if you're brought up, you know, like Sonia was saying, Carol was saying there, is that if you're brought up in an environment that doesn't have particular emotions in it because they weren't in your parents' environment, then them, the ability to receive them feelings or project them are not going to be in your body. They're not going to be in your nervous system. So you're actually going to go be attracted to other people that don't have the ability to be present to love you either. And if they actually did start to love you, which is what usually happens after 3 months, then the problems have to kick in to keep them away from us. So even as Jodie was saying there, that the problems start, these problems are there to keep people away from us. And so it's actually one of the things that when you're working with young men or older men that have never developed the capacity, that when you're in a relationship with a female and that she starts to trust you, at some point she's going to open her heart and she's going to become vulnerable, and that's a natural thing that happens. Now, for a lot of men that are damaged like I was, when that happens, their heart opens and they say, please don't hurt me. But then you look at this heart full of cuts and pus and pencils and shopping trolleys and broken relationships, and you recoil. And then they feel rejected. And then that process kind of just continually plays out in relationships, that the arguments, the violence, it all happens at the moment when we start to get close. And that's the bit that needs to be interrupted. That's the bit like we're trying to say with this program, that's something that hopefully you develop the ability to be able to feel that unhappy response that's trying to cause us to reject that broken belief system that happens almost unconsciously, and allow it to not respond, so we're not pushing away, and we start feeling the hurt and healing the hurt in us, allowing the other person to come close. Now remember, the spiritual malady is separation. The same process is playing out with God, that when he comes close to us, it reminds us of all our darkness and all our difficulties, and we repel. And that's why the beginning of this program is saying, look, man, we need to deal with your sins. We need to reduce your sins so you feel a little bit more comfortable coming closer. That's what I say, don't be too hard on yourself, anybody at the moment. The important thing is at the moment, look, it says in this book, it says constitutionally incapable. I'm pretty sure that's everybody. Because it says that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism. So that includes you. Your human power and anyone else's human power probably isn't going to relieve your alcoholism. We're saying that God could and would if he was sought. So at the beginning, what we're trying to attempt to do at the beginning of this program, because this is a very basic spiritual book. I mean, jokingly in the past, I say, look, this book is for spiritual babies. It's a very basic spiritual book. I mean, if they could put on a scale of all the great spiritual teachings of this time, you know, if they put this book in the picture form, it would probably be like a cartoon form. It would probably be for children. It's very basic spiritual principles. But it's also made for, so I say this is a book for sick babies. It's a very beginning, but it's kind of like that optician thing, like I'm saying. At the minute, we're saying, look, getting these principles in place, remember, it's just trying to remove the blocks. It's like making a pair of glasses. Look, if I take my glasses off, everything's gone blurred. I can't see. My perception of the reality has been altered. So naturally, I can't see that screen anymore. Naturally, something's gone wrong with my perception of reality. So I need glasses. Oh, look, it's all gone clear again. And so that's kind of what the program is in the early stages, is we learn the principles, but it is like a prescription. That when we get the prescription on, then we can start to see something. And so at the beginning, it's important just to try and to learn the program, to learn the get the prescription on, start to get your glasses on, and then you start to become awakened, you start to see, and then all of that stuff that Jodie and Carol and Sonia talked about. We all know that's a tough journey, man. If you've only got one shoe, it's going to take a bit of time to figure out, how do I build the other shoe? That's going to take a bit of time. And that's but unless you get this recovery now down at the beginning, you ain't never going to get to that bit. It's an ongoing journey. Like I say, this process and this program is kind of like the vehicle. It's not the destination. But I promise you, most of you guys are thinking when I say that, your perception of reality is twisted, you're probably like, oh yeah. But then if I asked you, what does that mean? You'd probably go, I don't know. It's like, look, you may hear, but you're probably not understanding that you've got a twisted perception of reality, and it's going to take a little bit of time for it to untwist. And so don't be hard on yourself. So today is Jodie's not being hard on herself and Forgiveness Day. Woohoo! It's going to be a great day. Anyway, that brings us to the end. And just one other thing before we go, sorry, a bit late, but for those guys that are here, is that what I did is I was going to do one on the principles, because Sonia suggested it, and I thought it was a good idea that we look more at the principles. But then I started to Google a bit about the principles, and it kind of says step 1 and gives you the principle, but I never found anything that I thought was good enough, because I think each step contains a lot of principles. So what I thought would be good today, if you guys want something to do, is to look at each step, like step 1, and then write down what you think the spiritual principles are that you would need in that step. So there's a bit of homework for today, and tomorrow we'll have a little discussion on the principles that we should be applying to our life.